When you combine reality TV and model railroading, what do you get? Today on the Roundhouse, we're going to find out. All aboard!
In days past, the roundhouse was where the railroad worker united with the steam locomotive, each to prepare for the journey ahead. Today, it's where we examine the history, the industry, the machines, the hobby, and the passion behind railroading. News, interviews, stories, and more. So climb aboard. This is The Roundhouse.
Welcome to The Roundhouse. I'm your host, Nick Kozrak, and this is episode number 84 of our Trains and Railroading podcast, where we're talking about everything in the industry and the hobby. You name it, we discuss it. Today, we are talking to Kathy Millatt. She is a model railroader, a YouTuber, and one of the judges on the British TV series, The Great Model Railway Challenge. The show debuted in the fall of 2018 on British television, and it takes model railroading and makes it a competition. Very interesting way to bring the hobby to a larger audience. Kathy talks about her experience on the show. She talks about model railroading. She shares some of her tips and tricks. Before we get to that, though, I want to thank the Age of Steam Roundhouse for sponsoring today's episode. Be sure to include them in your summer vacation plans and visit their website at ageofsteamroundhouse.org. Our guest today is a modeling vlogger, blogger, and was a judge on the Great Model Railway Challenge, which was a competition series in the United Kingdom. Please welcome to the Roundhouse, Miss Kathy Millatt.
Hi, Nick. It's good to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. So, good place to start. What got you into model railways?
Well, I would blame my dad. When I was a child, we used to get out his own. He had a railway when he was a kid. We used to get that out, and it was a Hornby 003 rail, which is really, really common in the UK. So it was solid metal, and Bristol Castle used to come out and run round at Christmas. And for a while, I had a 4x8 plywood layout. You know, sand was the height of my scenery expertise. And then life got in the way, homework, other things, and I gave it up for a while. But eventually I went on holiday and saw a model railway exhibition and thought, oh, I really enjoyed that. And I remembered that kind of emotion of enjoying it. So I started modelling again and got loads of copies of the UK Railway Modeller, and eventually started modelling American when I saw some American layouts and I really liked the styling of them.
So what drew you to the American style? I'm curious as to what you've seen as far as the difference between UK styles and US styles.
Well, what I saw over here was UK models of US outline, which is very different to the type of layout you see in the US. So in the UK, most model layouts are quite small and a lot of them are portable. You do get a lot of people with them up their loft or attic, and they may be, 12-foot square or something, sometimes bigger depending where they live. But you don't see the huge basement empires you get in the US. And I think as a result, there's a lot more emphasis on attention to detail and fine scale modelling in the UK, and a lot less emphasis on operations. Nobody really does operations over here particularly. It's just not a scene that even exists. And the idea of going around and operating on someone's layout is something you see in some of the US modelling societies, but it's not something you'd see in a normal British modeller.
I think you're right. I've been learning more about this micro layout trend, and I feel that there's more UK modelers already doing that than US ones. But it fascinates me because I do think there's something to be said about taking essentially a 4 square foot space and trying to populate that as much as you can.
And I think, my current one that I'm doing is a micro layout. What I really appreciate about those smaller layouts is I've got my 12-foot triple deck New Haven layout in the loft. And I find it quite daunting. There's just too much of it. And I go up and there's just so much to do on it. And it's all the same. It's all just New England in the summer. Whereas if I want to do a video about snow and ice, I can't do that on my layout. If I want to do a little bit of slate modelling, because I fancy doing a North Wales slate dock or something, I can't do that because I've still got to finish my New Haven layout. But a micro layout or a module, you can do 4-foot stop and do something different. And the chances are you'll finish it. And then you can add more details and you can try new techniques because you're building stuff more often. I'm just about to start hand laying track on my new micro layout. I haven't hand laid track or put track down upstairs in my New Haven layout for donkey's years. I probably did it all like 7-8 years ago last. And I haven't needed to do it because the track's been all down. So I really like the concept of being able to do something and finish it. And that's why I think basement empires are just too big for me personally. I would never do one.
You want to do something big and expansive, yet you've chosen a layout that is big and expansive in the form of the New Haven. And I guess a good place to start is, why the New Haven? That's a little bit of an obscure one to my thinking. I usually, when I hear UK modelers lusting over US stuff, it's our big container trains or something like that. So what drew you to the New Haven?
Well, I was looking to do an American layout and I thought I'd do New England because it's very green, and I felt that coming from the UK, that was something I could model more realistically because I can look out and see grass out my window. I can't look out and see the Mojave Desert. Having said that, I wasn't sure where to do. I wanted a bit of ocean in there, so I wanted the sea. I fancied a big city, and I was really drawn to New York, and I was wondering about doing the High Line. And then I was chatting to a friend who basically said to me, don't do the New Haven. Whatever you do, Kathy, don't do the New Haven. You won't be able to buy anything. You'll find it really depressing. Don't do the New Haven. And after an hour and a half of me telling me not to do it, I was doing the New Haven. Just, sheer, I'm going to do it because you don't think I should. But he was a little bit too, don't do it. And I'm not somebody who backs down from a challenge.
That's certainly a good challenge, although in recent years, there's companies to make it a lot easier. Rapido comes first to mind.
Yeah, and PTK used to do loads of it as well. So there's been quite a lot out there. I've never had a problem in the years I've been modelling with having enough locos and boxcars and things to run a decent layout.
So when you have a layout of that size, especially triple decker, how do you overcome the enormity of it and sort of break it down where it seems like you prefer to work on kind of the smaller scenes and what gives you a bit more range, so to speak?
Yeah, I break it down into dioramas. So most of my upper deck is pop out little dioramas. So I can build a diorama downstairs. It's a craftsman kit or something. I can produce something really beautiful where I can work on it with good light, sitting down, with plenty of space. And then I can take it back upstairs and I can put it in my layout and just do the scenery around the edges to get it to blend. So that's my approach for doing the difficult scenery. And that way you're breaking it down into dioramas, so it becomes a more achievable set of goals, I guess.
That makes sense. And when it comes to how you select your project, is there a particular process you go through? You just think, oh, this is something different and I want to try this. What leads your creativity?
Generally, somebody asks me at the moment. So I'm doing, I quite fancy doing Welsh slate. And this is, I've got 4-5 projects on the go at the moment. And the Welsh slate is one where I wanted to do one. And I spent 6 weeks in hotels, staying in the same place as one of my co-judges, Steve Flint, who's the editor of Railway Modeller, the largest UK magazine. And he was like, oh, Kathy, would you do us 12 articles on scenery or something? And I said, oh, I'm thinking of building a micro layout, but I'd like to do Welsh slate. But Welsh slate isn't necessarily the best for scenery. Let's face it, it's mostly just slate, quarry. It's very boring. So I thought, I know, I'll do the dock end. And we looked, and there's a sort of sander gauge with a narrow gauge going over it. So there's a lot of very interesting rail features, track features to model on it. And so I'm doing this micro layout on this particular subject because Steve Flint asked me to write 12 articles. I'm doing snow and ice because I've wanted to do snow and ice for years, and I've been buying the stuff for years. And David Pop from MRVP said to me, Kathy, can you do some snow and ice we would be looking for someone to do it and we think it'd be great. And I was like, yeah, I've been wanting to do that for ages. So I've got an MRVP snow and ice one I'm about to start. I've been doing some product testing on my YouTube channel, and then I'll do a snow and ice diorama, which will probably go up later in the year, so they're not all going up at the same time. And so snow and ice gets done. And that's something I've been wanting to do for 2 or 3 years. I did a very small diorama. It was mostly sci-fi in 2015, I think. And I've been wanting to revisit that and have a go at doing proper ice and icy rivers. So, that was David Pop from MRVP suggesting that one. So all my recent stuff that I do for YouTube, people send me things to review. So my Kino diorama last year, Doug Foscali sent me from his diorama Blitz range, and I just love the kit. And so I spent almost a year building this Kino diorama, and I try and do something different each week as I build it. So it's like how to paint cobbles, how to paint bricks. So one project becomes inspiration for many different videos.
What led you to create your blog and your YouTube channel?
I'm a contractor, and I went into contracting 3-4 years ago. And while I was on my first gap between contracts, having finished my permanent jobs and going into contracts, I thought, I've got to do something that's work-like to keep me busy. Otherwise, I'm just going to spend 3 months doing nothing. And the aim is to have 3 months off most years. And so I started a YouTube video blog, and it's been interesting. I've learned a huge amount since then. I look back at my early ones and just go, but at the same time, I was doing one a week. So I spent a lot of time modeling. And that video schedule becomes your life, really. You can't do anything else because every weekend you need to be doing a video ready for it to go up. And I look at it and I have no idea. I think it was because I wasn't at work when I started it. I have no idea how I managed to keep that up for a couple of years. But I eventually dropped down for a bit last year, and then I'm up to 2 a month at the moment, which I can just about keep up with. But when I go back to work full time, it's really hard to keep up with doing that many good quality videos. So at the moment, I'm between contracts again, and I'm looking for something to come up in the new year, and I'm taking this opportunity to catch up. Having said that, what I've done mostly is some family stuff, and then some back. I've been doing all the baseboards for my micro layout, which has to be one of the most boring videos you can produce. So weeks and weeks of work will end up in 10-minute video or something. A lot of that week's of work is waiting for glue to dry. It's not all working on it. And there's been a lot of design work, and I've been trying a lot of new techniques. So what I'm finding is there's a lot of failures. So if I had just laid Pico track, my track would be down by now. Because I want to do stub points where the track moves rather than the blade themselves, point blades move, I'm actually having to, I'm actually 3D printing them, then casting them. So, you do a load of castings, you prototype it in 3D printer, you cast it, you spend a lot of time doing things that I could have just gone out and, said to Pico, give me 12 turnouts and, it'd be laid by now. So I'm finding, because I'm trying new techniques, which is what I love doing, I like trying new stuff, it's taking a long time and not producing very much. So yeah, this gap hasn't been as productive as I'd have liked in output of videos, but it's been really productive in, I've learned a lot about 3D printing, I've learned a lot about prototyping and just new ways of doing baseboards and all that kind of thing.
It's very tricky when you're trying to create content that you already have a particular following and kind of rhythm, but you want to push yourself harder to be able to learn while you're doing it. But then if you're learning, you're not necessarily at a point where you could deliver a particular blog post or YouTube video or what have you. It does become an interesting art to balance those worlds of things, because there's what you need internally to learn and what you need externally to communicate.
Yes, and sometimes you find when you're doing videos and you have too tight a schedule and you get behind, you end up putting work out there and then thinking afterwards, oh, now I've done it once that way, maybe I'd tweak it the next time and do it slightly differently. So what I try and do now is never do that. I make sure that I've done it at least once or twice and had a bit of a chance to think about it. And I'm trying to come up with some shorter videos I can put in when the techniques aren't quite working and I'm still working on them and making sure. So, the points are a case in point. That didn't quite work. The points are a case in point where I've had a go at 3D printing them. I've gone through 4 iterations. I've now cast them, but my resin had got too cold and it had separated and it didn't cast to a solid. It was a bit tacky when it set, and I'd had problem with it last time. So I think when I got it, I hadn't let it heat up. And the first time I'd used it, I would obviously upset the balance in the jars, despite stirring them quite a bit. So I've just ordered some more rubber, which was also very thick. And I find these things go off after 2 or 3 months. And I did them last in about November. So I'm waiting for supplies to come in. And that's the other thing. If you've got a really tight video schedule and suddenly you need to order across Christmas and New Year for something that people aren't going to be back into the New Year, you're suddenly thinking, oh, I now need to rejig my whole video schedule to make sure that I'm not just running on that. So I've got several strands running at once now. And that just makes it hard to track because I don't feel like I can sit down and concentrate on one project because I've got MRVP, I've got Port de Norwich, which is my micro layout, I've got Snow and Ice for my future series, and I've got loads of odd ones that are coming in that are spinning off those. And sometimes it feels like I'm doing an awful lot of strands and I'm not nailing anything. But I think once it all gets up on the video channel, you suddenly go, wow, that did work.
With your own YouTube channel, is that something that you do completely as a hobby pastime? I see that you have 24,000 subscribers as of January of 2019, which is a very impressive amount. So is that something where you're trying to hold to that schedule just for the sake of your viewers or because of other obligations?
It's a hobby. I couldn't make enough money out of this. 24,000 subscribers. There is no way you can make a living out of it, would be my view. Where you make the money is sponsorships and things like that. And I don't want to be tied to one, product or something. I want to be, and I do take products that I would already use from people and then declare it. But quite often I turn a lot of people down going, I don't use your products. I'm not willing to put a video up saying how great they are when I don't use them. I've got a set coming soon, which I've just received in the post, and I've already got 2 or 3 of their items, and I love them. So when they said, would you like to, do a video and an honest review? We don't mind what the review is. We just want you to video it. I was like, that's great, because I've already got some of these, and I really like this product. So I'm very happy to do that because I know that it's going to be a really good review. There's other things where you've looked at it and you've just gone, nah, that didn't work. What do I say now? So, that's one of the guiding lights for me is I want it to be interesting to my viewers and I want it to be fair and reasonable. That said, I've drifted off the question, which was, is it a business? I've got a Patreon page where I ask people to donate. I'm a contractor. I can take longer breaks between and spend more time on my videos. I don't think I could make a living out of it at the moment. So it is just a hobby. But it costs quite a lot of money to do all this. It's a hobby, but it's an expensive hobby. So at the moment, the money I'm getting for writing the articles for Railway Modeler is all going just on the cost of the actual layout by the time I've bought new locos, because it's in a different scale and prototype to what I normally model. So I can't just go and get anything off the shelf. And I've tried some new products, some of which have worked, some of which haven't. So, I end up, most of the money just gets ploughed straight back into videos and producing more stuff.
Seems like a good way to balance it, even if just that little bit of income helps to finance the hobby. Yay for Patreon. You've got one. I've got one. It's a great way for being able to sustain this side work that we love doing.
And actually, I was going to say, I've just spent today, for my higher level patrons, they get a set of prints every now and then. And I've just spent today sort of collating all the prints and putting them in and putting them in envelopes. It's been quite exciting to actually be able to send stuff to some people who've been supporting me. So I'm really looking forward to getting that in the post, going around the world.
Looking at the channel, I was kind of curious to see what people were most interested to learn about from you. And your number one viewed video as of right now is how to model muddy roads.
Yeah, it's quite an old one as well. And it is, I love doing that kind of thing, muddy roads and just something. I mean, the reason I like a muddy road is A, you've got tyre tracks, B, you've got a little bit of water, you change the colour because you've got dry bits and wet bits, and C, you've got grass. So to me, it's just a perfect scene to model. There's a lot of interest in it, and you can put dandelions. You can do a huge amount with it, and it's just a muddy road. But, obviously I'm quite weird in that I find that very exciting.
Number 2, and I think this one comes up frequently amongst modelers, how to make static grass look amazing.
Yeah, that is mostly using the WWS layering spray has made a huge difference to my static grass. I could never get it to look particularly good. And having that extra layer in the way, I met them at Worley, which is a large UK show. And I was chatting to them and they're on the Pico stand demonstrating. And I was just blown away about how easy it was to do. So it's been brilliant. It's been brilliant to share that with people because I just think it makes such a difference to my grass. So I'm hoping it makes a difference with other people's as well.
When we return, Kathy will describe her experience on the Great Model Railway Challenge. Every horse needs a stable, especially those made from iron. The Age of Steam Roundhouse is a brand new facility constructed less than a decade ago, housing nearly 24 steam locomotives. The facility features an 18-stall, accurately reconstructed brick roundhouse surrounding a 115-foot turntable, the largest private collection of steam locomotives in the world, and a fully functioning working backshop where skilled staff actively continue to restore and repair steam locomotives. Having visited multiple times, I could say that it's a very different experience from other museums. Now, the Age of Steam Roundhouse is opening its doors to the public. Tours will be offered Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, May through October 2019, of the Roundhouse and shop area. Tickets can be purchased in advance, and to see their other upcoming events, follow them on social media and visit their website at ageofsteamroundhouse.org. Let's talk about the Great Model Railway Challenge, Kathy. How did you first learn about it?
I was on holiday in Vietnam and I got the random email they sent to most of the model railway clubs in the UK asking people to take part in it. And I didn't think much because I was on holiday and I was off for 3 weeks. So when I was off, the president of the NMRA British region, David McLaughlin, had got in touch with the production company and said he thought it was an amazing. I mean, David's a real people person. He's brilliant for the hobby. And he had got in touch. He'd actually met the exec producer, had a chat with him. And he said, you have to have Kathy. She does this video, YouTube stuff. She's really good. You know, she's a woman as well, which won't harm you. She's brilliant. She's got the right character. So I got back off holiday with David nagging me to get in touch with the production company. And in the end, I did because he nagged me and he put all these good words in for me. And I went down to London and met them. And, you know, they're a really nice team of people, really genuinely interested in showing the hobby at its best. They didn't want to send it up or take the mickey or do any of the things that is quite common in the UK. I'm not sure what it's like in the US, but in the UK, being a model railway modeler is just almost like the butt of all the jokes. So it was really good to get in touch with them. I did a screen test a month or two later and became a judge.
Awesome. I was excited when I learned that this show was a thing because honestly, the US, we're non-existent. We're not the butt of jokes. Jokes don't exist about us. People aren't even aware. We haven't even risen to that level, which there's sort of a blessing and a curse associated with it. I think there's a greater amount of awareness about railways and subsequently the enthusiasm in the UK than railroads and subsequently rail fans on our side. And I think that's the cultural difference. So it's good that your culture is in an environment that acknowledges it on some level and that this show could then boost that further.
It is. And actually one of the big papers recently had a spread on Jules Holland, who's quite famous in the UK for his sort of jazz music sort of stuff. And he has clubs and things. And he always does his annual Hootenanny, which is on TV across New Year. And he had his layout in Railway Modeler in the January edition. And he's a really quite well-known celebrity and he's come out and he's in there. And it started, I think, over the last 2 or 3 years to turn around. There are a lot of programs on TV which have railway themes, and some of them you might get. So Michael Portillo's Great Railway and Great Railroad Journeys. And he's been to America. He's done 2 or 3 in America, and I've seen those, and they're really fascinating tour guides. He did them in the UK first. He's done the continent. So he goes around on a train and goes to various places and does history. There's loads of programs on the Underground, Paddington Station, forgotten railways, walking along all the ones that got ripped up by beaching. There was laying engineering sort of challenge more than anything else, laying track across the Scottish Glens to get a 16mm loco along. So there's been an awful lot of TV railway-related programmes recently over the last few years, and I think that's starting to rise. There's always been this romance of steam in the UK, and there's an awful lot of preserved railways. So just up the road from me is the Severn Valley Railway. You'll find loads of children on them, either in school parties or with their parents. People go on holiday, they go to a preserved railway for the day, and they'll go ride on the trains. So children do get exposed a lot to railways as fun to ride on. My family, when we were young, we just used to go out for a day on the trains. We would literally just get on the trains and ride on them for the day. So I catch the train to work when I'm working in Birmingham, and I will catch the train down to London. I would never consider driving to some of these places. So you're right, there is a lot more exposure to railways as a amusement entertainment through these preserved railways. And also they've now come up as general entertainment on TV. So it's starting to reinforce that message, I think, all the time.
You and Steve on the show were and are railway modelers, but the hosts were not. So what was your impression of what they learned through this experience?
Oh, they loved it. They were like, boys in a toy shop, effectively. They loved what people were doing, how people were doing things, just having a controller in their hands and playing on the trains. They just love that whole experience. So I think they had a great time. And I think it brings out the inner child in us playing with trains. No matter how seriously you take it, there's still an inner child that just loves playing with your own world. It's your world. It's run to your rules. It does what you want. And I think they just bought into that, and they brought the vision that people had for their railways.
You're used to filming your own setup with your camera in your home. What was the difference of being in a studio environment and seeing this modeling going on a larger scale?
Well, they were obviously a lot more professional than I am. The audio equipment, the cameras, everything was just done a lot better than I do it at home with my iPhone, iPad and 2 cameras. So the setup was just really well lit. They had a great eye for it. They know what they're doing. You realise how many moving parts a director has. How they see the world is very different to how you and I see the world. I'm very literal in how I do my YouTube channels. I sit down and I record myself doing something. They have a story and they follow a story, but they know the shots they need to make it work. And when it comes up on TV, they made entertainment. They didn't just say, oh, and here they did some static grass. They made static grass entertaining. They put in a joke about it with Paul James's hair, but or lack of it. But there's a whole way of doing things that just takes it to that next level. So it was fascinating to be a part of. But also there's quite a lot of time just to talk because I'm not on set all the time. There's times where they don't want me around because they're doing all the people who are actually working, whereas I'm just a judge. So I have busy times and less busy times. And I had an amazing time being able to go out and just talk to everybody who was taking part. And I learned so much. Now, I go on YouTube channels and I tell people how to do things. But there's some things I rarely do, like electrics and electronics, because I've got past that stage in my layout. And they're not that exciting for me probably to show on a video because I'm not that great at them. So I had a brilliant time chatting to guys who worked on oil rigs for a living and did electronics there and who were really good at what they did. And I was able to talk to them and get some tips on some of the areas I wasn't so good at. But also just everyone does things differently. And there's some really gifted modelers who've been on there. And a lot of that got missed in the rush. But actually, they did do behind the scenes quite a lot of filming of people weathering and doing that. And there were some really, really gifted modelers.
For those who haven't seen the show, I should probably step back and explain the format. It was a 6-episode series for series 1. And the first 5 episodes, 3 teams competed to build a 5-foot by 10-foot layout. And then in the last week, the 5 winners from each of the previous weeks went up against each other and built a different layout, but they also had to make their layouts interconnect.
Yeah, and it's saying the time was constraint, because the point of it really was that they had to do it all in the heats in 24 hours. And it was spread across 2.5 days, but it was 24 hours to build their layouts. And for the final, they got an extra day and it was 36 hours. But they weren't allowed to bring anything with them for the final. For the heats, they could bring 6 pre-built items and a bit of track laid. But by the time they got to the final, they had to do it all on site in 36 hours.
Which is incredible, not just as far as you think about the time to just build that, but also to be able to get to your point, the storytelling involved with that. I think that's really ambitious on the producer's part, because there are so many details to show with just one layout. Now you're talking about 3, and being able to show the layout, give a sense of personality to the team members, or at least the team captains who are leading these. So there's a lot going on, and I admire the balance that they were able to find within that.
Yeah, I heard a lot of people talk about the fact there wasn't a lot of detailed how-to on modelling on this. And the answer was it was Friday night, 8 o'clock entertainment, and it was aimed at the entertainment market. So yes, they did mention briefly how to do static grass or a little bit about resin water. But the aim of it was to take people on that journey, not necessarily to tell them how to do it themselves in the future.
Now, something I am curious to have demystified a little bit, Kathy, because watching the show, it seemed like there was some sort of criteria as far as how you and Steve graded the layouts. It wasn't just you looked and said, okay, that's it, boom, and the winner is bam. But on the show, it never really broke down what how that worked, and there's the scratch building challenge that would occur, and some teams opted out of it, but it was never quite evident how that impacted whatever scores there were. So I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about the criteria that you and Steve used.
Yeah, the number one criteria, we had 4 we were set in conjunction with the production company, we'd come up with 4. The first one was functionality. It had to run. And actually in the heats, that was almost the deciding factor most weeks. Does it run? And a lot of people had problems with their track running well, or just with time and getting things to run. So that actually was the most important one. Did their animations that they put in work? Did everything get finished, I guess is the way to put that, and run well? The next one was creativity. They were each given a theme. So the first week recorded was Fire and Ice, and then they had TVs and movies and Water World, and another one I've just totally forgotten. And they had to produce to that theme. So it's how well did they interpret that theme. Then they had authenticity, which actually got dropped, I think, by the time they got to the TV, because they decided 4 was too many. And, how authentic can the future be? It's quite a hard one to test. And then the last one was really attention to detail. It was the quality. What was the quality of their build like? And that's a hard one, because when you're rushing, quality is normally the first thing that goes. And you found that the winners in all the heats always produced the best working and the best finished, but also probably the highest quality layout. And they generally, one person managed to achieve all those 3, and the other people normally fell down in one category.
Yes, Fire and Ice was a theme, globe-trotting, British television, Waterworld. The themes were a good selection in the sense of giving a basis and some sort of construct, but also allowing people to go in very interesting directions. With all the directions that people went in, what was your personal favorite layout?
I think it was the final winner. I love sci-fi. And apologies if you haven't seen this and people haven't seen it when they listen to this, because it's going to give away who won. I love sci-fi. It is one of my, after modelling railways, it's modelling sci-fi. And I just love that whole thing. And I'm quite a geeky sci-fi person. And actually, you're geeky when you go to, I met Jason Schron at Worley when he was over with Rapido. And at one point he turned to me and said, Kathy, I think you're even more geeky than I am. So that's when you know you're geeky, when Jason Schron said so. And it was just, it was awesome. That winning layout, I've given it away now, but it was really just completely different and blew my mind.
Even as I can't say experienced modeler, mildly experienced modeler as myself, I was quite impressed by the creativity that these teams would come up with the layout that you're referring to. The fact that they used some HO, or I guess over there it's double O, and some N scale to show depth, and they had layers of clouds to separate between. I mean, there was clearly a lot of thought put into this, and the execution, especially given the time, was, as far as I could see, I mean, obviously it's tricky on TV because shots are really quick. You can't analyze a layout like you can in person. But from what I saw, looked really impressive. Another one of my personal favorites was Going Forth from the Railway Operating Division.
Oh, yeah. That was an amazing layout. That was so nice. And that was really good. And both of those teams, I mean, all the teams were lovely, but both of those teams were really lovely. But Railway Video Division were very young as well. So it wasn't, and actually there were quite a few teams who were really good, who had quite a lot of youngsters in there, which I thought was very good for the hobby, because it shows that, yes, experience helps, but you don't need to be older to produce a good layout.
Let's talk a little bit about the element of diversity in modeling. Do you think, at least for the UK scene, but maybe you've seen it for the US as well, that diversity is growing not just in terms of age, but also in terms of gender? I'm
not sure about age diversity, because I can't look back 50 years and remember what the spread was. I do know that when I came into modelling, I was one of the youngest people in the group that I'm in, and I'm still one of the youngest people in the group that I'm in. But each group has its own dynamic. One of the things I loved about the Great Model Railway Challenge, I went to Worley, which is the largest UK show. It's at the NEC, and it's open to the general public. It's a big show, 150,000 square foot, so big show. They had so many children coming up to see the layouts, and they were 3 deep round, because they had 3 of the layouts from the Great Model Railway Challenge. They had the winners and the winners heat wins, so they had 2 of them, and then they had Santa's Globe Trotting as well, which was one of my personal favourites. Really fun layout, and all of those teams went to town in encouraging people. There were people going into shops asking, can we, we want to model as a family together. So is the diversity growing in the UK? I think there has been a trend towards it being an older white person's hobby. And I think that's and male, definitely very male. I think that's partly about money. People generally have more money to spend on hobbies as they get older, but the hobbies change as they get older, and a more sedentary hobby perhaps suits people later in life. I'm not saying that generally, but it can do. They have more space. People have bigger houses as they get older. They've bought a bigger house, and they have more time perhaps as children grow up and leave home. So they've got more time to devote to modelling. So I can understand why there are more older people in the hobby. What I see though is that there are definitely younger people out there. And those people are really keen and really good. The bulk of the hobby may still be on the older side. And I'm no spring chicken anymore. But, I can see definitely there are younger people in there. And I now feel old when I go to some things and I see some of those younger guys there, because they are so good and they're so knowledgeable and they're so passionate. It's brilliant.
It's good that it's expanding. Something that I think you recognize as well, when I look at your YouTube channel, and you're doing these scenic dioramas, they're not necessarily just for model railways. They're also for your love of sci-fi. I saw one about moss on trees that was inspired by the Halo video game series. And it seems to me that part of the secret to building up our ranks is to find these crossover points where we love it for the trains, but they maybe love it for something else. But all those combination of interests, and I think the TV show hit upon this, that people can come back at it from a non-railway background, but bring what they love to it, and then you get something really creative and unique out of that.
Definitely. One of the really, really good layouts that is around on the scene at the moment is Cato Pass, and that's a sci-fi one, and it often wins best in shows at exhibitions because it's a crossing over. It's sci-fi is very much in the psyche now. People love seeing that sort of thing. I popped into Games Workshop once. I don't know if you have them in the US, but in the UK, it's a huge shops in a lot of cities and towns. And I popped into our local town Games Workshop, and I was chatting to the manager there about how he attracted young people into modelling, because it's basically you make a model and you play a game. And there are people there who like the game playing. There are people there who just like the modelling and the painting on their miniatures. I mean, you will never see as good painting anywhere else. It's amazing. They can make molten metal look live just out of paint. They're so gifted. And he said, well, we have a couple of things you don't have. We have aliens and we have dinosaurs or something like that, you know, aliens and robots, I think it was. So we have aliens and robots. And I thought it was really good that now that theme is starting to come into model railways, to say, actually, you can cross these things over. It's your railway, especially as a child. You don't want to produce a slice of New England in 1954, July 5th. You know, it's not what you want to do. You want to have fun. And I'm glad to see that fun coming back in and encouraging people in. And if they later on choose to go fine scale and do the New Haven and, you know, July 5th, 1954, then that's perfect for them. But if they'd rather carry on doing a little bit of sci-fi on the side, then I think that's quite fun.
Something that I'm in the middle of doing right now, as my listeners know, is I am building a youth-based model railroad club in my corner of northwestern Pennsylvania called the Meadville Model Railroad Club. And we're in our first year of doing it. And so far it's been successful, but mostly the interest has been from teenagers who are already modeling. So I'm trying to look at ways, and I'm sure other listeners out there are thinking the same thing, trying to look at ways of reaching out to teenagers and the parents thereof who maybe have interest in art or some part of STEM education and bringing them in. From your perspective, what do you think those might be?
I've got to say, most of my... I played Titanfall 2 this week because I wanted to play a game and I haven't played a video game for ages, and I got Titanfall 2 on the side. And there's a point to this, don't worry. It's a video game. I finished that video game and I wanted to go and model BT7274 because he's awesome. And there's a great model on my mini factory that I could go and print. It's just bigger than my actual print bed at the moment. And I think there's a lot of interest out there in things that are not quite mainstream model railways, and you can get people in. So you said I did a Halo video series. You can start people down the modelling route and then bring it in. What you want is people to be creating with their hands and getting used to building things. So every now and then you could say to people, right, let's just put Halo on here and let's have a few people attack. And Halo may be a little the wrong generation now, but you know, most people know what Halo is and they'll get it if they're into that youth, teenage, male kind of area. They've probably all played it. There's things that you can tap into that people love, and they go, oh, you can do a model of that. And then you've got the modelling. And the trick once you've got the modelling is to say, oh, how about the scenery? How about this? Oh, why don't you now put that on a model railway? You can bring people in sideways almost, but you just have to tap into what they like. Now, I think in the US it's harder because you don't go on trains as much. But I could easily say to people, how about a Thomas layout? Because Thomas is for younger ones, not for teenagers. But Thomas is quite big still over here, and people go and see Thomas days at all the preserved railways. So they're used to seeing Thomas around. You just have to find the entry point that correlates between what they do with their normal other lives and hobbies and where that intersects with modelling. And someone will already be modelling it, probably, and you can go and see what they're doing.
So given the success of the Great Model Railway Challenge, a lot of the feedback I've heard and seen online has been positive. I personally enjoyed it. It sounds like you did as well. Are you aware if there's going to be a season 2?
There is a season 2. It's, I think at the moment, scheduled to be 8 episodes long, and they're still trying to work out how they fit those extra 2 episodes into the format. They'd like to keep with the teams for longer so that you see the teams more, but obviously that means building a lot more layouts. So I think they're just working on how that's all going to pull together. We've got our filming dates. It starts filming right at the end of May, and we'll be out again in autumn. That's fall for the US, at the end of the year.
That's going to be exciting. And I think that'll be good because with a lot of the teams, we'd get to know the captains, but maybe not some of the other people on there. And especially speaking to the point of diversity, some of those teams had women, but I think we only heard from a couple of them. So I think that'll be great to get to know them a bit more and follow their progress with specific projects. So it's good to see that from their standpoint, it was a success and that merits future episodes.
It was really good, and it was definitely a success. I'm hoping that we get a women's team this year. That would be really good. There was a woman who said she wanted to do a team. That's why I'm saying that. Just to have, talking about diversity, we've talked about age diversity, but we haven't talked very much about sort of, it very much is a male hobby at the moment. And I think that's such a shame because there's so much in this hobby to offer people. There's plenty of women who like technical things and like that kind of problem solving and the engineering side. And it'd be great if they could see this as a really valid hobby for them to express themselves in as well.
I think the show's really good on that front. I'm only sad it doesn't air in the US. Otherwise, I would direct everybody to it. And I think it'll be a while before our culture is ready for such a thing. We just need trains to come more back into the mainstream for that to happen on our side. But it's really good to see where, like everything, the successes are over on your side and we on our side try to learn from them.
Oh, I don't think that's quite true. I think there's an awful lot of success in the US in modelling, and there's so much good stuff coming out of there. I think everybody feeds off each other, and that really does build everybody up.
As far as your own schedule of doing future episodes of your vlog, you talked about the slate mining, micro layout being a current focus. What are some other projects that you're excited about?
So that one, that's quite a big one. It's a sort of 1100 mil. I'm going to have to convert that. So it's about 3 foot by 2 foot or somewhere similar to that, maybe near a 4 foot by 2 foot micro layout. And that's going to take me, I suspect, most of the year, but I am due to get it into the railway modeler before then, so I need to crack on and get that done. I've got snow and ice coming up, and I've got 2 dioramas for that. One for MRVP, which is a HO railway scene, and then to make sure I'm doing something different and not conflicting, for YouTube, it'll film at the same time, but probably go up later. I'm doing a Lapworth locks. It's just down the road from me. Canal locks, and they're just going to have snow and ice. They're just a convenient vehicle for having water in the scene, so no railways on that, and a bigger scale. And it's going to give me the opportunity to test out some things which I've been looking forward to. So those are the sort of 3 projects that are currently filming. At the same time, I have some personal projects that I need to finish that probably won't end up on videos. One of which was I 3D printed Iron Man. Talking about how you get yourself into modelling, I watched all 3 Iron Man movies in 3 nights and then came off and found a 3D print online and 3D printed Iron Man. And I've got as far as the first 2 coats of paint, and he needs a really good sand and polish now to get it perfect before the metallic coats go on. And I just haven't got around to that yet. And then I've actually got the New Haven layout as well, which has a number of dioramas I need to finish off and areas I need to work on. So I need to spend more time on that. I need to get some stock on it and get it running again. But I only have so much time, and it tends to go on whatever the big project is on the videos at the moment. So it will be the snow and ice and slate dock port scene for the next year, I suspect. But coming out of that is all sorts of stuff on 3D printing, on sort of design, some stuff on electronics. There's a whole piece on how to use Arduinos and servos with Arduinos and tie them into DCC and things like that. So I've been spending a lot of time working on those. I just need to land them into the videos next.
At the end of the day, what do you enjoy most about the hobby?
Ooh, that changes depending what I'm doing at the moment. I like doing new things, which is why I like smaller layouts and dioramas. I like trying new ideas, but I do like scenery. I like creating a world in miniature. I just like the idea that at the end you can't tell that it's a model.
And for people listening to this, rail fans or not, who are familiar with model railroading, what advice do you offer them?
I would say start small. It can be very daunting when you look at these basement empires. You turn up at people and you sometimes don't realise they've got 20 friends turning up every Tuesday to help them build them. I would say see if you can find a modular club or start with a smaller layout. Don't expect your first layout to be that good. Use it as a testing ground to try out all the skills. I feel like you almost need to practice and get your hands into being used to doing modelling, getting used to those fine motor skills again. Because I can't even write properly now because I type so much. My writing's abysmal and it was never great. So I would say start small, choose something that's interesting, that you just enjoy, and do it. And don't listen to the people who walk in and just criticise, because there is odd one or two in every group who will criticise what you do without the consideration that you're just starting and you may not know that much. So, just stick to your guns. You're starting, start small, do something that interests you and build on it.
Excellent advice. Kathy, thank you so much for joining us here on the Roundhouse and sharing your modeling expertise and TV expertise. It's really great that you had the opportunity to be a judge on the show. I'm glad that it's going to continue because I think that it's a great flagship for people who don't have full familiarity with the hobby, and it's a good way to normalize it and hopefully get more diversity and more people involved.
I totally agree. And it was so much fun to do. And if it gets people into our hobby, I'd just be so pleased because it's a great hobby. I've got so much out of this hobby, and I'd like other people to get, the same opportunities and the same fun and enjoyment that I have.
The fact that you can communicate the fun enjoyment you have is an important element. Sharing what we love about it is what helps it to grow, in my book.
Yeah. And, I think the internet makes it so easy for people to now be inspired and see the hobby. The only thing I would say, and this is another tip for if you're starting out, sometimes it can be quite hard on the internet to work out which things work, which don't. You don't know what question to ask because you don't know what to type into Google to get the answer sometimes. And I actually, when I started out, a model railway club was really important to me, with actual people who looked at what I had done and said, oh, you're doing it this way. Have you ever considered doing it that way? Or why are you doing it this way? Or just, you talk through how they've done it. So I would say internet is brilliant for getting stuff out there, but do see if you can pop along to a local model railway exhibition if you're in the UK or in the US. Pop along and see a real layout and chat to people, because you'll learn as much talking to people as you will surfing the internet.
Excellent advice. Kathy, thank you so much.
Oh, it's been brilliant, Nick. Thank you.
And now, the question of the day.
Last time on the Roundhouse, we were talking about the reunion of Norfolk and Western 611 and Norfolk and Western 475 at the Strasburg Railroad. That led to the question, if you could see two steam locos of the same railroad fired up side by side, which ones would you choose? Here's some of your answers that I selected. First, from the roundhousepodcast.com, Jason Leach writes, if I could see any two steam locomotives from the same railroad fired up side by side, I would pick Santa Fe Northern 484 and Northern 2926. I would have said Union Pacific 844 and 4014, but I got to see that in May. That was quite an event, Jason. Glad that you got to experience that. It looked like it was fun. It also looked like there was a lot of people. So there's ways in which I did miss it and ways in which I didn't. This from Patrick Webb. I would say the LNER A1/3 Flying Scotsman and A4 Sir Nigel Gresley. To see the engine named after their designer, with the LNER's flagship, until Mallard set her speed record, would be very cool indeed, especially with both of them in BR colors. The contrast of BR blue and BR green would be fun to see. Good choice, Patrick. Now from Twitter, Chris Walters says, Nickel Plate Road 765 and Nickel Plate Road 587. Those two have been together in the past. That would be really neat to see in the future, and not out of the realm of possibility. Lastly, on Facebook, Eric Kabusta says Grand Truck Western 4070 and 6325. Both were involved with Harry Truman's campaign train across Michigan. 6325 pulled the train, while 4070 was the backup locomotive. And Russell Swinnerton writes, Reading 2100 and 2102, which could actually happen soon. It's nice to think that many of your answers were things that could be feasible. It says a lot about the state of our preservation world in 2019 and for the future. Your question of the day for this episode is, if you could create a TV series about trains and railroads, what type of show would you create? Let me know on the roundhousepodcast.com. Links to social media are there. As you heard, we had a sponsor for this episode, and if you are interested in sponsoring an episode or two of The Roundhouse, visit theroundhousepodcast.com/advertising and see how you can get your business, organization, or enterprise on the show. Thank you guys for listening, and remember, as always, that The Roundhouse is our house.